Why, hello there, Exile. Today I want to share with you my endgame setup for my Wave of Conviction Ignite Elementalist. Now, you're probably wondering, why not Ethereal Knives? Why not Vortex? And let me break that down for you. Wave of Conviction has way higher base damage, which is then going to inflict a greater Ignite. It also has exposure baked into the skill, so you need less gear to actually get going on it. And there's a brand new jewel that converts physical as extra elemental, which we're using whenever we cast elemental weakness, which is all the time. Wave of Conviction also has a tag of fire, lightning, and physical, which makes it easier to get scepters and an amulet that is +1 or +2. All right, let's take a look at the feared fight. Now, a lot of people struggle with this fight, but this is one of the easiest times I've had with the fear on any character ever. And that's because we have tons of layered defenses. Now I'm going to tank a little bit of damage just so that you can see it. And definitely not because I'm terrible at the game and can't dodge stuff. Yeah, definitely not. That's not what happened. Definitely not that. Now this is with 2 additional projectiles, which probably was not a good idea. You probably don't want to do this fight with 2 additional projectiles. Don't do it. But I was able to tank it because I have almost spell suppression cap, or like 93, almost 100. And then I also have spell block, and then I have recovery whenever I'm blocking, plus vitality, plus some life leech, plus a life flask. But the bossing experience isn't really why you play a build like this. What you really play it for is the chain explosions in the mapping scenario, which we're just using Obliteration Wand with the corruption from 20% AoE in combination with a Carcass Jack to get pretty decent AoE, which basically all you got to do is kill one enemy. That's going to blow up, and then it's just going to nuke the whole rest of this screen. So you just dash around. It's really, really fun. Oh, the explosions are so satisfying. What a lot of people also don't know is Wave of Conviction actually goes farther with skill duration, and it travels faster with increased AoE. So getting this increased AoE is going to allow us to hit off the edge of the screen and pretty quickly. Now, my scaling on this build is so crazy that just my Tempest Shield can clear a map on its own. But, you know, we're not going to do that. Maybe I'll demo that later if you guys are interested in that. The main things I've been farming with this are Expedition and Legion. Then I later added in both Breach and Harbingers. All of those, it pretty much deletes them, which is really nice. The only mobs you ever have to worry about is really a Soul Eater, because you nuke the whole screen and then the monster gets tons and tons and tons of Soul Eater stacks and it will destroy you, which is also why I added in a shield and why I'm getting life gained on blocks so that I don't have to deal with that or can survive that shenanigans. Now, if for some reason you want to just play with even more damage than I have, which is more than you probably ever need in a mapping experience, you could swap out Grace for Hatred, and you could swap out Determination for Herald of Ash and Herald of Purity. But for me, I preferred not dying and just having a solid build. I think the damage is plenty with this setup. I mean, it kills the bosses in like 1.5 seconds, so who cares? Now, I will warn you, if you play this build, it'll probably ruin just about every other build that you ever play in the game, or at least for me it kind of did. I re-rolled or made another character and started playing that, and I'd rather play this character. I just love this character, and I accidentally leveled to 100 essentially with it. Well, I got to 99.6 on accident, and then I just did 5 ways for my last 40%. But this is actually my first level 100 character. I've been playing way too much. I'm supposed to be working on the coding channel, which reminds me, in case you didn't know, I started a coding channel. Right now, we're focusing on Python, and I'm also sharing things that I've learned over my 16 years experience working in the tech industry. Now, if you're wondering how to start a character like this, I have a super budget version with a leveling guide on the channel, and then I also have a suggested mapping setup on the channel, so look at those 2 videos. Then I also live stream several times. That whole playlist is also on the channel, and that is POBs of every single day that I streamed of what I was playing on that day with the Atlas setup that I was playing for that day. When you do an expedition, let the whole thing spawn instead of doing what I did here, and then you can basically kill them in about 1 wave of conviction. All right, now let's take a look at how this build operates. Let's start with the flasks. And that's because I'm using some mechanics to increase the damage with the flask. Now, first I'm using an eternal life flask just so that I have some additional bounce back. I like going with the instant recovery when you're on low life. I have 4,700 HP. So when I get down to about 2,000, if I pop this, it's just about going to top me off completely. Remove bleeding as well because it's really annoying. Now, the nice thing about having a fizz skill is something like ENDGAME Promise. This is going to give you a ton of damage because I'm converting all my fizz into elemental. So I get the fizz and then I also get the elemental damage in full. Now, eventually you want to get some leech on the tree, which you'll get from a cluster jewel. But early on, this is really a big deal because you get that 2% cast damage leeches life, your only source of life leech early. Then I just have a defensive flask, a granite one that's giving me increased armor and auto pops when it's full. Then I'm using a cinder swallow. Now this makes it so that I recover 3% of my life whenever I'm getting a kill on an enemy. It also makes them take increased damage while they're ignited, which they're always going to be ignited because it's an ignite build. And then I have this reduced mana cost of skills during effect, which is really important because I'm using a Divergent Divine Blessing with Divergent Inspiration with Malevolence. And when I pop this, it allows me to cast Malevolence for 60 mana. So I get damage aura off of this flask. Now you'll notice for bossing, I have this and my other unique flasks set up so they're only used when I hit a rare unique enemy, because I only really need the bonus damage or these mechanics on tanky rares or uniques. Then lastly, I'm using a Taste of Hate. This is also really good because it gives you both physical mitigation, but it also gives you the fizz as extra cold, which is, well, we have a fizz skill, so extra damage again. When we're clearing, we're using Obliteration Wand with an implicit for increased AoE, by the way. But basically, this is our main skill, Wave of Conviction. And you can see with my increased AoE that I have, which I have 10% from the gloves, 20% from this, 45 from this, and then the ascendancy gives me 60 here while I don't have convergence. And in that case, then it hits all the way to the screen. Play styles like this, when you're mapping, you're going to hit it, and then you're going to shield charge through. And you also can reposition with Flame Dash. So just like that. Now, when you're dealing with tankier mobs, we have elemental weakness and flammability. We're using our helm here to lower the resist further. If they're negative, this 50% increased fire and cold res actually also applies, pushing them more negative. Now, elemental weakness with that new jewel that I teased earlier makes it so that when I cast it, I'll get 39% fizz as extra. That's why I'm casting that first. Then I have Enduring Cry on my left click. I can only put it on my left click because I have the Call to Arms keystone, and I have that keystone by my relic that I got. Now, other keystones that you might want to pick up instead, Mage Bane, this will help you spell suppression cap, and Ghost Dance is another good one. Or you could just pick up Elemental Overload, that'll save you 1 point or give you the flexibility to path a different way. We also have on our boots Scorched Ground. Now, I just wanted the generic one, but I rolled it a ton of times and I just was like, whatever, we'll just keep the unique enemy. But basically, you put down Scorched Ground, which I can't show you because I have the unique enemy one. So you go boom, 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 and then walk through them, and then their resists are lowered, and they're probably going to die really quickly. For bossing, I'm using a swap into this scepter here that has +1 skills, +1 all physical skills, damage over time multiplier, and fire damage over time multiplier. This is one of the reasons why using Wave of Conviction is nice, because I could use the fizz or the lightning or fire for all skill gems to get a +2. Otherwise, I use this, of course. Then I already showed you the helm. Now, I got these corruptions, one, so that I can fit in all these auras, still have mana left over to deal with the malevolence when I can pop a flask. And then shock effect, I am pushing it all the way to the point where I always have 50% shocks. To do this, I have 30% increased effect of non-damaging ailments here on my amulet. And this is a really sick amulet, by the way. Now, you can go with a Ulnathal's amulet instead of this, which a lot of people are doing. But then you got to figure out how you're going to get Dex into the build if you want to run Grace. And I wanted to run Grace. Then I also have increased effect non-damaging ailments here on my boots. And then I'm also running Awaken Unbound Ailments. So that plus the nodes on the tree are going to get me to 50% shock damage. For Dex, I also picked up a Brutal Restraint. Earlier, I used the Int transformed into Dex, which I put here. But now I bought one of these, and I picked up an extra Endurance charge since I'm using Call to Arms with Enduring Cry. That's giving me Endurance charges, and I get Frenzy charges on kill while I'm mapping from this. And then to satisfy the Dex requirements, I got Dex and Dex. So yeah, pretty good stuff. And then some elemental damage. So very useful overall jewel here. Now let's talk about the shield. So this shield here, implicit recover life when I block. Then it says some spell suppression, some block, and then I crafted spell block. And just using this shield with glancing blows and no other nodes invested into block puts my block at 7462 because I'm able to run Tempest Shield in my helm. So this is nice for spell damage because I also have 93% spell suppression. So when I'm taking spell damage, I'm blocking it a lot of times, recovering health, and then I'm also suppressing it. And then for basic attacks, I already have 59% evade, and then I have the block on top of it. So the 40% of hits that I don't just straight up evade, then I'm actually blocking, which is reducing it further and getting me life back. For life back in general, I have vitality, so I have a little bit of life regen. I have the block, I have this 3% from the flask, and then I also have, like I mentioned here, the leech on Doriani's Lessons. I'll just show you this cluster right here that has Sadist and it has Prismatic Heart. Then for my ring, I'm using Polaric Devastation. This is very nice because it increases the duration of ailments, and when I'm using the other ring that I'm using, which is Replica Emberwake, it reduces the duration of ignites and makes them tick quicker, so it greatly lowers your ignite ticks. Now, you got to be very careful with your explosions. Since you don't have Awaken Unbound Ailments on your explosions, if you're not investing in some increased duration, you just won't get any ignite ticks at all on your explosions from the wand. Then for boots, we grab the ignites deal damage faster, shock ground, spell suppression, some resist, some life, movement speed. Then I went with just life and good resist on a belt, a Stygian Vise, of course. And then I just went with something. I need this 15 effect of lightning ailments to be able to cap. It has a little bit of extra fire, some life, energy regen, and I get my immunity to corrupting blood from here. Then my gloves, I'm using fire exposure on hit, and I'm using ignites inflict spread to other ones. I want a higher tier of this, but I ran out of the currency to do it, and then I finally hit it on lower currency, and I'm too lazy at this point to kind of fix it, but I probably should. Now, I don't actually need fire exposure on hit because I have a little bit or a chance to get fire exposure from the helm, but I don't like this. But more importantly, Wave of Conviction has the built-in exposure. However, the explosions will do the exposure for you if you have this on your gloves. So it helps that clear. Now instead, if I didn't want to do this, I could, for the ignites, get a medium cluster jewel that has Fan the Flames, and that would give me 15 radius ignite prolif. There's also a barracks ring that has a 20 radius ignite, which so you could use those early on when you're gearing out. Then for my chest piece, I went with a Carcass Jack because it helps the Wave of Conviction travel farther. Juicy Explosions, of course, because I'm softcore. And then I got increased damage with socket duration of gems. Now that's the other nice thing about Wave of Conviction. It also has AoE and duration. So it's possible to get a +2 AoE, +2 duration, or you can get a +2 AoE with +1 gems because I'm using Empower, push the damage even further. Then also, because we're a fire skill, we can use Awaken Burning damage to get the +1. If you're using EK, you can't get the +1 fire skill gems because it's only a Fizz gem. Lots and lots of good stuff there. All right, that covers the gear other than, I guess I'll go over the jewels. So I showed you this jewel already. I have a fully defensive Watcher's Eye, so I could pick up even more damage if I wanted to do a Malevolence Watcher's Eye. I don't feel that that's needed. And then this is some ailment duration, some damage over time multiplier, and reduce mana cost of skills, just so I'll be able to cast Malevolence in combination with the Flask. Plus I picked up these to reduce mana as well. Then Balance of Terror, and that's pretty much it for the jewels. Okay, so skills. I have Wave of Conviction as the main skill with Cruelty, Awaken Unbound Ailments, Divergent Inspiration Support, Awaken Burning Damage, and Empower. Now, if I'm doing all these curses, my Enduring Cry, my Cast When Damage Taken, Molten Shell setup, all that stuff in combination, I have mana issues. So some people solved mana issues with Eldritch Battery, and then they go down here and pick up Wicked Ward. That will definitely work, but I like having a little bit of energy shield just in the build. And if I'm going with Ghost Dance ever, or I want that option, that's always going to give me a little bit of extra survivability. Now, I solve this then by just attaching life tap support to all my different skills. So I have Shield Charge, Life Tap, Enduring Cry, Faster Attacks. So this is just costing life. Then I have Life Tap, Elemental Weakness, Flammability, Flame Dash, so all those are just costing life as well. Only thing that is costing mana is Wave of Conviction, Malevolence, and Cast When Damage Taken, Molten Shell, which is 18. Then in my helm, I have Determination, Vitality, Tempest Shield, and Grace. And then I have Cast When Damage Taken, Molten Shell, like I showed you. Yeah, that's all the skills. For Pantheon, I went with Soul of the Brine King so that I don't have to be frozen, reduced effect to chill, quicker block recovery, and I don't want to be stun locked. And then I run around with this usually, which is less duration of Ignite and unaffected by Burning Ground. I, of course, killed all the bandits as well. For Ascendancy, I picked up Shaper of Flames first, then Shaper of Storms, then Mastermind of Discord, and then Heart of Destruction last. Okay, let's briefly talk about the configuration in POE and what the numbers look like. So I have this damage over time in right now, and my flasks are checked, and with that it says about 25.9 million DPS. But how practical is that? So first of all, when you're bossing, if you're in a map, okay, maybe you'll have frenzy charges. Outside of that, no, you're not going to have frenzy charges. Are your enemy going to be on shock ground? Only if you put it under them, otherwise they're not. So you can have a little bit of an overstatement here. Then are the flasks active? Well, I have them set up for unique enemy, but maybe they won't be checked. And then for mapping, I'll be probably on an obliteration wand, so it'll be about 13 mil if I take all those things off. However, like when I'm bossing, the only thing overstated for like the feared would be the frenzy charges. So just so you know, different ways you could try to configure and how it's kind of cheesed.